I didn't get a polite phone call from the police telling me my daughter was in an accident. I didn't get a knock on the door. I got a notification on a secure encrypted server that only 5 people in the world knew existed. I tapped the screen expecting a corporate update. Instead, I saw a live stream of a parking garage. Then I heard the scream. It was Laya, and then came the sickening wet crunch of a brick hitting her face. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. The boardroom was dead silent. 12 men in $5,000 suits were waiting for me to sign a merger that would reshape the tech industry. The air conditioner hummed, a low, expensive sound that usually calmed me, but right now, all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears, loud as a jet engine. I stared at the phone in my hand. My hand wasn't shaking. That's the thing about my training. When the world ends, you don't panic. You freeze, you assess, you kill. On the screen, the video looped. It was short, 15 seconds. Laya, my beautiful 22-year-old daughter, was walking to her car. She was wearing that yellow sundress she bought last week for her birthday. She looked happy. She was probably humming a song. Then, 3 shadows moved. They didn't just mug her. They didn't ask for her purse. They swarmed her with a coordination that made my stomach turn. This wasn't random street crime. This was military precision. One held her arms, another kicked her legs out from under her, and the third one picked up a landscaping brick from the garden bed. He didn't hesitate. He swung it like a hammer. The sound, God, the sound. It wasn't like the movies. It was a dull, heavy thud followed by a sharp crack. Laya didn't scream after the hit. She just dropped silent. Then the man with the brick turned to the camera. He was wearing a ski mask, but his eyes were visible, cold, dead. He looked right into the lens, right into my soul, and spoke 3 words. Package delivered. Victor. They knew my name. I stood up. The chair fell backward, hitting the floor with a loud crash. Mr. Sterling, one of the lawyers asked, his voice trembling. Is everything all right? I didn't answer. I couldn't speak. If I opened my mouth, a roar would come out that would shatter the glass walls of this skyscraper. I turned and walked out. I left the merger, the billions of dollars, the reputation I had built over 10 years. I left it all on that mahogany table. I took the elevator down 40 floors. My mind was already shifting gears. The CEO of Sterling Tech was gone. Victor, the former Tier 1 operator, the man who used to hunt ghosts in the desert, was back. I got into my car. I didn't drive fast. I drove with terrifying focus. I needed to get to the hospital. The text message that followed the video gave me the location. St. Jude's Medical Center. The drive was a blur of red lights. I didn't stop for when I burst into the ER. The smell hit me first. Antiseptic and fear. It's a smell you never forget. Whether it's a field hospital in Kandahar or a private clinic in Seattle. Laya Sterling. I barked at the nurse. My voice sounded like gravel. She looked up startled. Sir, you can't be back here. Where is she? I didn't yell. I didn't have to. The look in my eyes made her step back. Trauma 1, she whispered. They just took her into surgery. I ran. I sprinted down the hallway, my dress shoes slamming against the linoleum. I reached the double doors of the surgical wing just as a doctor stepped out. He looked exhausted. His scrubs were stained with red, my daughter's blood. I grabbed him by the shoulders, maybe a little too hard. I'm her father. Tell me the doctor. A man whose badge read, Dr. Evan, gently removed my hands. He looked tired. Mr. Sterling, you need to prepare yourself. Is she alive? That was the only question that mattered. She is alive, Dr. Evans said, but his voice had no joy in it. But the damage, it's catastrophic. Multiple fractures to the orbital bone, the jaw, the nose, severe concussion, swelling in the brain. We are doing everything we can to relieve the pressure and reconstruct the facial structure. But he paused, looking down at his clipboard. But what I demanded, she won't look the same, Victor, he said softly. And we don't know if she'll wake up. The trauma to the brain was severe. She's in a coma. I staggered back, hitting the wall. I slid down until I was sitting on the cold floor of the hospital corridor. I put my head in my hands. Laya, my little girl, the one person in this world who looked at me and didn't see a billionaire or a killer, but just a dad. I remembered teaching her to ride a bike. I remembered her graduation. I remembered promising her mother before the divorce that I would always keep Laya safe. I had failed. I sat there for an hour, maybe 2. The police arrived eventually. 2 uniforms and a detective in a cheap suit. Detective Kyle, he looked bored. He looked like this was just another Tuesday night paperwork hassle for him. Mr. Sterling, Kyle asked, chewing on a toothpick. We saw the security footage from the garage. Looks like a mugging gone wrong. Gang initiation, maybe. These drug dealers, they get high, they do crazy things. I looked up at him. It wasn't a mugging. Kyle sighed. Look, I know you're upset, but her purse was gone. Her car keys were gone. It's a robbery. They knew my name, I said, my voice low. They sent me a video. Kyle blinked. A video? You have it? I tapped my pocket where my phone was. I have it, but you're not going to solve this, detective. Excuse me, Kyle bristled. We are the police. We handle this. You handle muggings? I said, standing up. I towered over him. You handle speeders and shoplifters. This was a hit. This was a message. If you have evidence, you need to submit it. Kyle warned. I'll submit what I want when I want, I said, turning my back on him. Get out of my sight. Kyle muttered something about rich arrogance and walked away. He didn't understand. He thought this was a crime scene. To me, it was a declaration of war. I walked to the viewing window of the ICU. They had moved her out of surgery. She was hooked up to a dozen machines. Her face, I couldn't see her face. It was completely wrapped in thick white bandages. Only her mouth was visible, a tube running down her throat to breathe for her. Her arms were bruised. I pressed my hand against the glass. The cold surface felt like ice. I promise you, I whispered to the glass. I promise you, Laya, I won't just kill them. Killing is too easy. Killing is a mercy they don't deserve. My reflection stared back at me in the glass. I didn't look like a businessman anymore. The tie was gone. The top button was undone. The eyes were dark. I pulled out my phone again. I needed to see the video one more time. I needed to burn the image of that man's eyes into my brain. I played it. Crunch. I flinched. Package delivered. Victor. I watched it again and again, analyzing it, breaking it down frame by frame like I used to do with satellite recon photos. I looked at the man holding the brick. I looked at his wrist. Wait. I paused the video and zoomed in. The resolution was grainy, but the lighting in the garage was decent. On the attacker's wrist, just peeking out from under the sleeve of his hoodie, was a tattoo. It was a black scorpion tail wrapped around a dagger. My breath caught in my throat. The air in the room suddenly felt thin. I knew that tattoo. I hadn't seen that symbol in 5 years. Not since a classified op in Venezuela that went sideways. That wasn't a gang symbol. That was the mark of the Viper Squad, a mercenary unit I was supposed to have wiped out. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't just about Laya. This was my past coming back to haunt me. But as I stared at the frozen image, I noticed something else. Something even more disturbing. Yila's hand. In the video, just as she falls, her hand is clenched tight. She wasn't just trying to break her fall. She was holding on to something. I looked through the glass at my daughter lying in the hospital bed. Her personal effects were in a clear plastic bag on the counter next to the nurse's station. I walked over. The nurse was busy on the phone. I quietly picked up the bag labeled Leia Sterling Effects. Inside was her torn dress, her broken watch, and a small clenched fist of fabric that had been cut away from her hand. I opened the bag. I reached in and unfolded the piece of fabric she had been clutching. Something fell out of it. It wasn't fabric. It was a small metallic object, a heavy silver coin. I held it up to the light. It was in challenge coin, military grade, and on the back, scratched into the metal, were initials I recognized. Initials that made my blood run cold. They didn't just know me, the person who did this. I had invited them to my wedding. The coin felt heavy in my palm, heavier than any piece of silver had a right to be. The initials scratched into the back were faint, worn down by time and friction, but unmistakable. B.T. Blake Turner. The air in the hospital corridor seemed to vanish. My lungs burned. Blake was dead. I saw his helicopter go down in the mountains of Kandahar 5 years ago. I attended his funeral. I stood by his empty casket because there wasn't enough of him left to bury. I folded the flag and handed it to his weeping mother. So, how was his challenge coin? The one he never let out of his sight, clutched in my daughter's hand moments after she was brutalized. Sir, the nurse's voice snapped me back. She was staring at me, or rather at the plastic bag I had opened. You can't touch that. That's evidence. It's my daughter's, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I slipped the coin into my pocket before she could see it. I was just looking for her phone. The police took the phone, she said, eyeing me suspiciously. Please step away from the counter. I walked away, my hand gripping the coin so hard the edges bit into my skin. This changed everything. If Blake was alive or if someone from his old unit had survived, this wasn't just a hit. It was a resurrection. And it meant the enemy wasn't some street thug. It was someone who knew how to think like me, someone who knew my blind spots. I went back to Wiela's room. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound in the world. I pulled a chair close to her bed. Her hand, the one that had held the coin, was bandaged and swollen. I gently placed my hand over hers. "I don't know how you got this, baby," I whispered, "but you just gave me the first breadcrumb." I couldn't trust the police. Detective Kyle was already writing this off as a random mugging. If I told him about a dead mercenary unit, he'd think I was suffering from PTSD. Or worse, if the corruption ran deep, I'd be tipping off the very people hunting me. I needed to go dark. I left the hospital and drove to my penthouse, but I didn't go inside. I went to the underground parking to a storage locker I kept under a shell company's name. Inside was a dusty, beat-up Ford sedan and a duffel bag I hadn't opened since I left the service. I stripped out of my tailored suit. I put on jeans, work boots, and a gray hoodie. I took the SIM card out of my phone and snapped it in half, tossing the pieces into a sewer grate. Then I opened the duffel bag. Inside was a burner phone, a laptop with military-grade encryption software, and a Glock 19 with the serial numbers filed off. I checked the chamber, loaded. I sat in the driver's seat of the Ford and booted up the laptop. I needed to find the man from the video, the one with the scorpion tattoo. The police had the garage footage, but I had access to something better. Sterling Tech had just launched a citywide traffic optimization program. We had cameras on every major intersection in the city. I hacked into my own company's back door. It took me 3 minutes. I rewound the feed to the time of the attack. I tracked the getaway vehicle, a black SUV with mud-covered plates. I followed it digitally through the city streets. They were careful, sticking to blind spots, but they got lazy near the Port District. At 4:12 p.m., the SUV pulled into a scrapyard called Iron Grave. I knew the place. It was a front. On paper, they crushed cars. In reality, they crushed evidence. I closed the laptop. I had a location. It was midnight when I parked the Ford, 2 blocks away from the scrapyard. The rain had started, a cold drizzle that slicked the streets. I moved through the shadows, every sense heightened. The smell of rust and oil grew stronger as I approached the fence. I didn't cut the fence that leaves a trace. I climbed it, finding toe holds in the chain link, vaulting over the razor wire with a silence that felt like putting on an old comfortable coat. The yard was a maze of stacked cars towering like rusted skeletons. In the center, a single office trailer had lights on. I could hear laughter. I crept closer, using the noise of the rain to mask my footsteps. I reached the window and peered inside. 3 men playing cards, drinking cheap beer. And there he was, the man from the video. He had taken off the scheme mask. He was younger than I expected, maybe 25. He had a scar running down his cheek. And when he reached for a beer, his sleeve rode up. The scorpion tattoo. My blood boiled hot and fast, but I forced it down. Rage makes you sloppy. I needed answers, not just a body count. I checked the perimeter. No dogs. No other guards, just these 3 idiots thinking they were safe. I moved to the door. I didn't kick it in. I tried the handle. Locked. I knocked. 3 sharp raps. The laughter stopped. "Who the hell is that?" one voice asked. "Go check it, Tony," said the man with the tattoo. Footsteps. The lock clicked. The door opened. Tony was a big guy, but size doesn't matter when you don't see the punch coming. I drove my fist into his throat. He gagged, unable to breathe, and I shoved him backward into the room, stepping inside and closing the door behind me. The other 2 jumped up, scrambling for guns on the table. I was faster. I didn't use the Glock. I used the environment. I grabbed a heavy glass ashtray from the counter and flung it. It hit the second man square in the forehead. He went down like a sack of potatoes. That left Scorpion. He managed to grab his pistol, but his hands were shaking. He pointed it at me. "Who are you?" he screamed. "Get back!" I pulled down my hood. His eyes went wide. He recognized me, not from the news, but from the dossier he had been given. "You?" he whispered. "You're supposed to be crying in a hospital." "I did my crying," I said, walking toward the gun. "Now I'm doing my work," he fired. The bullet whizzed past my ear, shattering a window. He panicked and pulled the trigger again, but the gun jammed. "Cheap ammo!" I closed the distance. I grabbed his wrist, the one with the tattoo, and twisted. The bone snapped with a wet pop. He screamed, dropping the gun. I swept his legs, slamming him onto the dirty linoleum floor. I put my boot on his chest, pressing down until he gasped for air. "Where is Blake Turner?" I asked. He wheezed, spit bubbling at his lips. I don't know who that is." I increased the pressure. "Don't lie to me. The coin, the tattoo? Who gave the order?" "It wasn't a name," he cried out. "It was a number. We get orders from a number. We get paid in crypto, I swear." "Who dropped the package?" I asked. "Who hired you?" "A broker," he sobbed. "A guy named Vinny. He runs the docks," he said. "He said the girl was just the start." "Just the start." I felt a cold nod in my stomach. "What does that mean?" he said. Scorpion gasped, his eyes rolling back in fear. He said, "You have to lose everything. First the daughter, then the money, then the life. They want you naked, Sterling. They want you to suffer." I stepped off his chest. He curled into a ball, cradling his broken arm. "Vinny at the docks," I repeated. "Yeah, Pier 42, he handles the logistics. Please don't kill me." I looked down at him, a pathetic, broken thug who had smashed my daughter's face for a crypto transfer. "I'm not going to kill you," I said coldly. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a zip tie. I bound his hands to a radiator pipe. Then I took his phone. "I'm going to make a call," I said. "Not to the police, to the local cartel boss whose territory you've been poaching on." His eyes widened in true terror. "No, no, please, they'll skin me alive." "You should have thought of that before you picked up a brick," I said. I dialed the number of a man I hadn't spoken to in years, a rival crime lord who hated freelancers. "I left the phone on the table, the line connecting package for you at the Iron Grave," I told the voice on the other end. I walked out into the rain. I had a name, Vinny, and I had a location, Pier 42. But as I climbed back over the fence, my burner phone buzz. A text message. Unknown number. I opened it. It was a photo taken from inside St. Jude's Hospital, from inside the ICU. It was a picture of me sitting by Yila's bed just 2 hours ago, holding her hand. The text underneath read, "Do you really think you can hide from us, Ghost? We're watching her breathe." I stared at the screen, the rain soaking the glass. They had eyes inside the hospital. Leia wasn't safe. I couldn't go to Pier 42, not yet. I had to go back. I had to move her. And I had to do it before the person holding that camera decided to finish the job. The drive back to St. Jude's was a masterclass in controlled panic. I wasn't speeding, I was teleporting, weaving through traffic with a precision that bordered on reckless. Every red light was a countdown to my daughter's execution. The photo on my phone burned in my pocket like a radioactive isotope. We're watching her breathe. They weren't just watching, they were mocking me. They were telling me that my fortress of money and influence was made of paper. I parked the beat-up Ford 3 blocks away this time, in a dark alley behind a Thai restaurant. I couldn't risk the main entrance. If they had eyes in the ICU, they had eyes in the lobby. I needed to become a ghost again. I pulled the hood of my sweatshirt up and slipped through the service entrance near the loading docks. A delivery truck was unloading linens. I waited for the driver to turn his back, then slipped inside, grabbing a discarded white lab coat from a laundry cart. It was stained with coffee, but in the dim light of a hospital corridor at 2 a.m., it would pass. I moved through the bowels of the hospital, navigating the labyrinth of corridors by memory. I checked the fire escape plans on the wall, mapping a route. I wasn't going to the main elevators. I took the stairs, climbing 6 flights 2 at a time, my breathing silent, my heart a cold, steady hammer against my ribs. When I reached the ICU floor, I paused at the door. I cracked it open just an inch. The hallway was quiet, too quiet. The nurse's station was empty, the glow of monitors, the only light. Then I saw him. A man in scrubs was standing outside Laya's room. He wasn't a doctor, he was standing too still. His posture was rigid, feet shoulder-width apart, a shooter's stance. He was looking at his phone, the blue light illuminating a face that was hard and impassive. He wasn't staff, he was the sentry. I couldn't just walk up to him, I needed a distraction. I slipped back into the stairwell and went down 1 floor to the break room. I found a microwave. I put a foil-wrapped energy bar inside and set it for 5 minutes. Then I ran back up. 2 minutes later, the fire alarm screamed. What chaos! Nurses poured out of rooms. Lights flickered. The heavy fire doors began to close automatically. In the confusion, the sentry looked up, distracted. He put his hand inside his scrub pocket, reaching for a weapon. I used the crowd of panicked staff as cover, moving against the flow like a shark in a school of fish. I came up behind him, just as he turned toward the noise. "Doctor," I shouted, grabbing his arm. "We need help in room 4. He flinched, looking at me with confusion. "What? I'm not." I didn't let him finish. I jammed a syringe I'd swiped from a card into his neck. It was a sedative strong enough to knock out a horse. His eyes went wide, then rolled back. He sagged against me. "He's fainting," I yelled to a passing nurse. "I've got him, go." She nodded and ran past. I dragged the unconscious man into the nearest supply closet and locked the door. I frisked him quickly. A silenced 9mm pistol, a burner phone, and a key card. I took it all. I rushed into Wyla's room. She was still there, thank God, still breathing. The machines beeped in rhythm with the fire alarm. "I've got you, baby," I whispered. "I'm getting you out." I couldn't take her out the front door. She was hooked up to life support. I needed a transport team, but I couldn't trust the hospital staff. I pulled out my encrypted phone. I had one card left to play, one number I hadn't dialed in 10 years. "Echo, this is Victor, code black. I need an evac at St. Jude's now." There was a pause, then a voice rough like sandpaper. "Victor, you're supposed to be a billionaire now. I'm a father right now. Miller, can you do it? 5 minutes. Roof." Miller, the best combat medic I ever served with. He ran a private ambulance service now, off the books for clients who couldn't go to the ER. I disconnected the monitors. The alarms blared louder, but in the chaos of the fire drill, nobody noticed one more beeping machine. I transferred her to a portable ventilator. I lifted her frail, broken body onto a gurney. She felt so light, too light. I covered her with a sheet, hiding the tubes, hiding her face. I pushed the gurney out into the hall, evacuating patient to triage. I shouted to nobody in particular. I pushed the gurney toward the service elevator. The ride to the roof felt like hours. When the doors opened, the cold night air hit me. The rain was still falling. Miller's chopper, a black unmarked medical evac, was already descending. The rotors whipped the rain into a frenzy. We loaded her in. Miller looked at me, his face scarred and grim. "She looks bad, Vic. Just keep her alive," I said, gripping his arm. "Take her to the safe house in the Burkers. Set up a full ICU, whatever it costs." "You know I will," Miller said. "But where are you going?" "I have a meeting at the docks," I said, stepping back from the chopper. "Someone needs to pay for the ride." I watched the helicopter lift off, disappearing into the dark, rainy sky. Lala was safe for now. Now I could hunt. I took the service elevator down to the basement, stripped off the lab coat, and exited the hospital through the morgue loading bay. I got back to my car and drove to the port. Pier 42 was a graveyard of shipping containers, a rust-cold maze under the orange glow of sodium lights. Vinny's territory. I didn't sneak in this time. I walked right up to the main gate. The guard in the booth looked up from his magazine. "Private property, pal. Turn around." I held up the keycard I had taken from the assassin in the hospital. "Vinny is expecting me." Delivery from the hospital. The guard squinted at the card, then buzzed the gate open. "Office is in the blue container stack, 3rd level." I drove in. The place was crawling with activity. Forklifts moving crates, men with assault rifles patrolling the perimeter. This wasn't just a drug operation. This was a paramilitary staging ground. I parked the car in the shadows of a crane. I checked my gear, the Glock, a combat knife, and the rage that was burning a hole in my chest. I moved through the containers silent as a wraith. I reached the blue stack. A metal staircase led up to an office converted from 3 shipping containers welded together. I climbed the stairs. I could hear voices inside. "Failed? What do you mean failed?" a voice shouted. It sounded like gravel in a blender. "Vinny, the shooter went dark," another voice replied. "Fire alarm at the hospital. We lost eyes on the girl. Find her." Vinny roared. "If she wakes up, if she talks, the whole operation is blown. The client will have our heads." I didn't wait for an invitation. I kicked the door. The metal buckled, the lock shattered, and the door swung open with a deafening crash. 3 men inside. Vinny was the fat one behind the desk. 2 bodyguards stood near the window. Before the bodyguards could raise their weapons, I put 2 rounds into the kneecaps of the one on the left. He went down screaming. The second one hesitated, a fatal mistake. I closed the distance and pistol whipped him across the jaw. He crumpled. Vinny scrambled backward, knocking over his chair. He fumbled for a shotgun under his desk. I vaulted over the desk and kicked the shotgun out of his hand. I grabbed him by his greasy collar and slammed him against the wall. "Where is she?" I growled. "Who?" Vinny squealed. "My daughter." I slammed him again. The container shook. You sent a shooter to finish the job. I didn't. I swear. I just take orders. Vinny was sweating bullets. I'm just the middleman. Who is the client? I pressed the barrel of the Glock against his forehead. Give me a name, Vinny, or I paint this wall with your brains. I don't have a name, Vinny cried. It's all encrypted. They use voice changers. But I have a meeting. I paused. What meeting? Tomorrow night, Vinny gasped. Midnight. An old warehouse in the meatpacking district. The client is coming to inspect the shipment. The shipment your daughter found out about. What shipment? I asked. Weapons? Vinny whispered. High-tech prototypes, stolen from a government convoy. Your daughter? She was snooping around the manifest. She saw something she shouldn't have. It hit me like a physical blow. Laya wasn't just a victim. She was investigating. She was doing what I used to do. She was trying to be a hero. Who is coming to the meeting? I asked, my voice deadly calm. I don't know the face, Vinny said, but they call him the architect. I pistol-hipped Vinny, knocking him unconscious. I wasn't going to kill him, he was useful. I zip-tied him to his chair and grabbed his laptop. I walked out of the container. The rain had stopped. The air smelled of salt and diesel. I had a time, midnight, and a place, the meatpacking district. But as I walked back to my car, a thought nagged at me. Vinny said the client used a voice changer. But the man in the hospital, he had a keycard that belonged to a specific security firm. I had seen the logo on it when I took it. Titan Security. Titan Security was a high-end private military contractor. Expensive, exclusive, and their CEO was a man named Grant. Grant was my best friend. He was the godfather of my daughter. I sat in my car staring at the keycard. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a betrayal so deep it felt like a knife in my back. Grant was at the hospital earlier. He had hugged me. He had cried with me. He had told me he would use all his resources to find the attackers. Was it possible? Could my brother in arms be the one trying to kill my child? I needed to be sure. I couldn't just storm in. I needed proof. I started the car. I wasn't going home. I was going to Titan Security headquarters. I was going to break into the office of the man who saved my life in Fallujah. And if I found what I thought I would find, God help him. Because the Victor he knew was a soldier. The Victor who was coming for him now was a father who had nothing left to lose. I drove into the night, the city lights blurring into streaks of blood red. The hunt was just beginning, and the prey was closer than I ever imagined. Titan Security's headquarters wasn't a dusty warehouse. It was a fortress of glass and steel in the financial district. I knew the layout intimately. I consulted on the security protocols myself 5 years ago. That was the problem with building a perfect cage. You always know where you left the key. I didn't go through the front door. At 3 a.m., the lobby would be manned by a skeleton crew, but the cameras were AI monitored. Instead, I accessed the building via the subterranean cooling tunnels that fed into the server room. It was tight, hot, and smelled of ozone, but it got me past the perimeter sensors. I hacked the electronic lock on the server room door using a brute force algorithm on my laptop. Click. I was in. From the server room, I patched into the internal feed. I needed to see Grant's office on the 40th floor. If he was the architect, there would be a link, a digital footprint connecting him to Vinny, or the accounts paying the mercenaries. I moved up the stairwell, avoiding the patrols. My boots were silent on the concrete. When I reached the executive floor, the silence was heavy, oppressive. The hallway was lined with portraits of former military leaders. Grant's face smiled down from the wall, the face of a patriot, a hero, a liar. I slipped into his office. It was expansive, smelling of leather and expensive scotch. I went straight to his desk. I didn't need his password. I needed his trash. I found it in the shredder bin. Not paper, but a burned bag that hadn't been emptied. I dug through it. Nothing but receipts and memos. Then I checked the safe behind the painting. I knew the combination, the date of the mission, where he lost his eye. September 11th, 04. The safe beeped and swung open. Inside, there was no money, no weapons, just a single file folder and a tablet. I opened the folder. My breath hitched. It was a dossier, but not on a terrorist. It was on me. Photos of my house, my routine, Lila's college schedule, my bank accounts. It was a surveillance log dating back 6 months. I turned on the tablet. It was logged into a secure chat app. The last message was sent 2 hours ago. User architect message. The girl is still alive. The father is loose. Clean up the mess at the docks. Initiate protocol 0. My stomach churned. It was true. Grant wasn't just involved, he was running the show. But then a notification popped up on the tablet. A live location ping, target acquired, warehouse 19, meeting in progress. The meeting Vinny told me about. It wasn't tomorrow night, it was happening now. Vinny had lied about the time to buy them a head start. I grabbed the tablet and ran. I didn't care about silence anymore. I took the stairs 4 at a time. I had to get to warehouse 19. I peeled out of the parking garage, the Ford's tires screaming. The warehouse district was 20 minutes away. I made it in 10. Warehouse 19 was a hulking structure of corrugated metal, dark and imposing. But I saw the convoy, 3 black SUVs parked near the rear loading dock. I parked a block away and approached on foot using the shadows of the alley. I climbed a fire escape to the roof and found a skylight. I peered down. The warehouse floor was illuminated by floodlights. There were armed men everywhere, mercenaries and tactical gear. In the center, a group was gathered around a table covered in blueprints. I adjusted my vision, focusing on the figures. I saw Grant. He was pacing, looking agitated, shouting orders at a man in a suit. "We missed the window," Grant yelled, his voice echoing. "Victor is going to burn the city down to find us." But the person he was shouting at, it wasn't a man. A figure stepped out from the shadows of the crates. A woman. She was wearing a trench coat, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked elegant, out of place among the soldiers and crates of weapons. She walked up to Grant and slapped him hard. "Control yourself," she hissed. Her voice was ice. "Victor is a blunt instrument. We are surgeons." I froze. I knew that voice. I knew the way she stood, the way she tilted her head. I pulled out my monocular to get a better look. It was Morgan, my ex-wife, Yila's mother, the woman who had wept in the hospital waiting room hours ago, the woman who had held my hand and asked me to pray with her. She wasn't grieving, she was commanding. "Is the shipment secure?" Morgan asked, wiping her hand on a handkerchief. "Yes," Grant muttered, looking down. "But if Victor finds out, Victor will find nothing," Morgan said, turning to look at the map on the table, "because by tomorrow morning, he will be in custody for the murder of the man who attacked our daughter." She smiled a cold reptilian smile, and with him in prison and Laya incapacitated, the trust fund reverts to the custodial parent. To me, I lowered the monocular. The world tilted on its axis. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a family slaughter. Morgan had orchestrated the attack on our own daughter to frame me, and seized the fortune I had built for Laya. I felt a tear run down my cheek, not of sadness, of pure, unadulterated hatred. I pulled the Glock from my waistband. I had a clear shot at Grant. I could end him right now, but Morgan, no. A bullet was too quick for her, too clean. I holstered the gun. Killing them now would make me exactly what they wanted. A murderer on the run. I needed to destroy them. I needed to expose them. I needed to bury them alive. I pulled out my phone and hit record. I zoomed in on the skylight. I captured every word, every face, every damning second of their conspiracy. Then I slipped away into the night. The hunter had just become the judge, jury, and executioner, and court was about to be in session. Driving away from Warehouse 19, it felt like something inside my chest had finally cracked all the way through. Morgan's voice replayed in my head, sharp and precise, like a scalpel cutting into bone. With him in prison, and Laya, incapacitated, the trust fund reverts to the custodial parent. To me, she didn't just betray me, she used our daughter like a bargaining chip on a table full of guns. I pulled over under an overpass and just sat there in the dark for a minute, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. For a second, the old me, the operator who believed in clean shots and quick exits, wanted to turn that car around, go back to the warehouse, and in both of them, Grant and Morgan, 2 shots. Problem solved. But that wasn't justice, that was instinct. They didn't just deserve to die. They deserved to live long enough to watch everything they built rot from the inside. Reputation, power, money, the circles they moved in. All of it needed to go up in flames, and everyone had to see them holding the match. To do that, I needed more than a gun. I needed the law. There was only one person I trusted with something like this. I pulled out the encrypted phone and scrolled through a contact list of ghosts and shadows until I reached a name. Harper Lane. Harper wasn't just a lawyer. She was a shark in heels, one of the best federal defense and corporate attorneys in the country. Years ago, when a small part of my past threatened to crawl into the light, she'd handled it like it was a parking ticket, She knew how power worked. I called. She answered on the second ring, voice low and sleepy. This better be important. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. Victor, I need you, I said. My voice must have told her everything. The sleep fell out of her tone immediately. You in trouble or causing it? Both, I said. I have a video. Conspiracy to attempt murder, arms trafficking, fraud, and it's personal. There was a pause. Where are you? I gave her an address. A small anonymous co-working space I owned through 3 shell companies. Neutral ground. 25 minutes later, Harper walked in. Black jeans, oversized sweater, no makeup, her hair pulled back in a messy knot. She dropped a leather bag on the table and looked at me like I was a live grenade. Tell me you're not about to confess to something I can't fix, she said. I slid the tablet across the table. Just watch. She put on her glasses and hit play. The footage of the warehouse filled the screen. Grant pacing, Morgan stepping into the light, the slap, the words about the trust, the plan to frame me, finishing Leia. I watched Harper's expression change, professional curiosity, then disbelief, then a slow, simmering anger. When the video ended, she took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Okay, she said quietly, that's a lot. It's enough to bury them, I asked. It's enough to start digging the hole, she replied, but it's not the full coffin. This proves conspiracy, intent, some arm stuff in broad strokes. But for the feds, for a judge, for a jury, they're going to want paper, transfers, contracts, emails, and they will say this video is deep fake unless we wrap it in hard evidence. They're using a broker named Vinny, a codename architect, offshore accounts, Titan security as a shell. Harper nodded slowly. So, we build a ladder, from street dirt to clean money, from Vinny to Grant, from Grant to Morgan, and whoever is above all of them. There's someone else, I said, pulling the coin from my pocket. I set it on the table between us. Blake Turner's challenge coin. Leia had it in her hand when they found her. Harper frowned. Blake Turner, the dead seal. Apparently not as dead as advertised, I said. If he's alive, he's not small time, he's architect level or higher. Harper stared at the coin for a long beat, then she pushed it back toward me. I'll start my side immediately. Quiet subpoenas. A friendly federal prosecutor. A judge I trust. But Victor, we need one thing we don't have yet. What? She met my eyes. We need Morgan's mouth on tape saying exactly what she said in that warehouse to you to connect motive, money, and blood. You want me to talk to her? I said slowly. I want you to let her think she's winning, Harper said. Let her think you're broken, desperate, unstable. She will come closer to finish you. That's when she'll brag. People like that can't help themselves. I hated how right she was. How do we record it? I asked. Harper reached into her bag and took out a simple silver wedding band, mic and transmitter. Old school because old school doesn't get hacked as easily. You wear it. I'll be parked nearby with a receiver recording everything. She'll want to meet somewhere she thinks she controls. I said the hospital, the chapel. She did her best acting there. Then give her what she wants, Harper replied. Call her, tell her you're losing it. Tell her you did something stupid. Lure her into talking too much. I slid the ring onto my finger. It fit like it belonged there. We left separately. Harper and her Tesla, me back in the Ford. On the way to the hospital, I dialed Morgan. Hands free, heart in my throat. She picked up on the first ring. No, hello. Just Victor. Where are you? I've been worried sick. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. At St. Jude's, I lied. I don't know what to do, Morgan. Her voice softened, silky and practiced. I'm on my way. Meet me in the chapel. We'll pray. We'll figure it out. Of course. The chapel, her stage. I'll be here, I said, and hung up. I parked in the far corner of the lot. Harper was already there, a block away, in an unmarked SUV. She handed me a tiny receiver earpiece. I'll be listening, she said. If she gives us enough, we go straight to a judge in the morning. If she doesn't? I asked. Then we keep pulling threads, Harper replied. But don't push, don't confront, let her talk. You act like the broken ex-husband begging for comfort. I nodded and walked toward the hospital entrance, every step heavier than the last. The chapel at St. Jude's was dim, lit by a few candles and the soft glow of stained glass. I sat in the back pew, head bowed, hands clasped like I was actually praying. Footsteps approached, soft heels on tile. Morgan slid into the pew beside me, her perfume wrapping around me, dragging me back through years of memories that now felt poisoned. She took my hand, squeezed it gently. You look exhausted, she whispered. Have you slept at all? I let my shoulders sag. I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see her. That video, that brick, she sighed. I know it's unbearable. I turned my head, letting the faint light catch the tears in my eyes. I didn't have to fake those. I did something stupid tonight, I said. Her body tensed almost imperceptibly. What do you mean? I went after one of them, I said. At the docks. I heard him. I think I might have killed him. Her fingers tightened on my hand. Victor, why would you do that? The police. The police aren't going to do anything, I snapped, then forced myself to calm down, to sound small. I just lost control, Morgan. If they find out, if they tie it to me. I let the sentence hang there, bait in the water. Her eyes searched my face, calculating, weighing options. You didn't tell anyone else, did you? She asked quietly. No lawyers, no friends. I shook my head. Just you. Her shoulders relaxed. A tiny smile flickered at the corner of her mouth. Then maybe, she said softly. This doesn't have to be the end of your life. I looked at her confused. What are you talking about? Morgan leaned closer, her lips almost brushing my ear as she whispered. What if I told you, Victor, that this whole thing doesn't have to destroy you, that it could actually free you? My heart pounded. In my ear, through the receiver, Harper's voice came through. A breathy whisper only I could hear. Easy, Harper said. Let her keep talking. Whatever she says next, the judge is going to want to hear it. I swallowed, nodded slightly, and looked back into Morgan's eyes. Free me, help, I asked. She smiled, slow, cruel, triumphant, and then she started to talk. Morgan's smile widened, her eyes gleaming in the candlelight like a predator savoring the kill. She leaned back slightly, still holding my hand, her thumb tracing small circles on my knuckles, a gesture that once meant comfort. Now it felt like a snake coiling around its prey. Victor, she said softly, her voice dripping with false sympathy. You've always been so rigid, so bound by honor and rules, but rules are for people who can't afford to break them. I kept my face blank, devastated. I don't understand, she sighed, tilting her head like she was explaining arithmetic to a child. You're sitting on a fortune, billions, and Laya, God, I love her, but let's be honest, she was always going to be a problem. She's too much like you, too curious, too righteous. The words hit me like physical blows, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't. Harper's voice buzzed faintly in my ear. Keep her going. This is gold. What are you saying? I whispered, letting my voice crack. Morgan squeezed my hand tighter. I'm saying that sometimes, Victor, the universe gives us opportunities disguised as tragedies. Yaila's accident. It wasn't an accident, I interrupted my voice. Hollow, you just said it yourself. Someone targeted her, yes, Morgan said, her tone shifting to something colder, more clinical. Someone did, and honestly, it was a blessing in disguise. My blood turned to ice, she continued, her words flowing like poison. The trust you set up for Laya, $10 billion locked until she's 30, or incapacitated permanently. The lawyers drafted it so carefully, didn't they? But they left a loophole. If she's unable to manage her own affairs and you're deemed unfit or unavailable, the custodial parent takes control. You? I breathed. Me? She confirmed, her smile sharpening. And with you spiraling, acting violent, attacking people at the docks. Victor, the optics write themselves. Grieving father loses his mind, does something terrible, gets arrested, and I, the heartbroken mother, step in to manage everything while our poor daughter recovers or doesn't. I stared at her, my mind reeling. You're talking about Leia like she's a line item. Morgan laughed softly, bitterly. Don't be dramatic. I gave birth to her. I raised her, but let's not pretend she was ever going to appreciate what we built. She wanted to be a social worker, Victor. A social worker. All that money, all that potential, and she wanted to throw it away, helping strangers. So, you had her killed, I said, the words tasting like ash. Morgan's expression flickered. Annoyance, maybe, or impatience. I didn't have her killed, I had her corrected. The plan was simple. Scare her. Rough her up enough to put her in a coma for a few months while you self-destructed. Then, once you were in prison and she was my responsibility, I could quietly redirect the funds where they belonged. Where's that? I asked, my voice barely audible. Offshore accounts, new ventures, a life free from the shadow of your self-righteous legacy. She released my hand and sat back, crossing her legs elegantly. Grant helped. Of course, he owed me after that mess in Syria you never found out about. And Vinny, well, Vinny's cheap and disposable. In my ear, Harper's voice was sharp, urgent. Victor, we have everything. Get out now. But I couldn't move. I was frozen, staring at the woman I had once loved, the mother of my child, and seeing a monster wearing her face. How much did you pay them? I asked, my voice flat. Morgan waved a hand dismissively. 5 million split between the crew. Pocket change. Really? The real expense was keeping Blake quiet. My head snapped up. Blake! Her eyes glittered with amusement. Oh, you thought he was dead? That helicopter crash was very convincing, wasn't it? Blake's been working private contracts for years. He's the one who recruited the team. He's the one who made sure it looked random enough that the police wouldn't dig too deep. Blake Turner is alive, I repeated, my voice shaking, not with fear, but with a rage so deep it felt like lava in my veins. Very much so, Morgan said, and very expensive, but worth it. He hates you almost as much as I've grown to. Resent you. Why? The word came out as a roar, echoing through the empty chapel. Morgan flinched, but recovered quickly. Because you left, Victor. You built your empire, and your perfect little life, and you forgot about the people who helped you get there. Blake wanted his cut. I wanted my freedom and Laya. She shrugged. Lila was just collateral damage. I stood up towering over her, my fists clenched so tightly my nails bit into my palms. Morgan stood too, smoothing her dress. Don't do anything stupid, she said, her voice losing its warmth entirely. You're already kneed in blood. One more body and you'll never see daylight again. I'm not going to kill you, I said, my voice eerily calm. She smiled. Good. Then I'm going to bury you. I finished alive in a prison cell, with every door locked and every window sealed. You, Grant, Blake, Vinny, all of you. I'm going to make sure the world knows exactly what you are. Her smile faltered. You have no proof. I held up my left hand, the silver ring catching the candlelight. Actually, I do. Morgan's face drained of color. Her eyes locked on the ring, then darted to the chapel doors. Too late. Harper walked in, flanked by 2 federal agents in dark suits. Behind them, a judge I recognized, Judge Nathaniel, known for his zero-tolerance policy on corruption and violence. Morgan Sterling, Harper said, her voice ringing with authority. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit attempted murder, fraud, and money laundering. Gentlemen, the agents moved forward. Morgan tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. They cuffed her wrists behind her back. Victor, she screamed, her composure shattering completely. You can't do this. I'm Laya's mother. I'm your. Nothing, I said coldly. And after today, everyone will know it. As they dragged her out, she turned back one last time, her face twisted with hatred. Blake will kill you for this. He'll finish what we started. The chapel doors slammed shut. I stood there breathing hard, the adrenaline finally crashing through my system. Harper walked over, placing a hand on my shoulder. We got every word. The judge is issuing warrants for Grant and Blake as we speak. It's over, Victor. It's not over, I said, staring at the closed doors. Not until Blake is in chains. Harper nodded grimly. Then let's go hunting. I walked out of the chapel into the cold morning air. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of blood orange and violet. Somewhere out there, Blake Turner was waiting. The ghost I thought I'd buried 5 years ago was very much alive, and he had my daughter's blood on his hands. But he didn't know what was coming. He didn't know that Victor Sterling, the billionaire, was dead. What was coming for him now was the ghost, the hunter who never missed, never stopped, and never showed mercy. And this hunt was personal. Morgan's arrest was silent. There were no news vans, no sirens, no flashing lights. Harper had pulled strings to keep the takedown quiet. Why? Because if the media caught wind of a billionaire's ex-wife orchestrating a hit on her daughter, the ensuing circus would spook the rest of the rats. And I needed the rats to think the ship was still sailing smoothly. I sat in Harper's office, watching the city wake up through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The recording from the chapel was already logged as evidence, sealed under a federal protective order. Judge Nathaniel had signed the warrants for Grant and Blake, but executing them was tricky. Grant was insulated by Titan Security's private army. Blake was a ghost, so Harper said, sliding a cup of black coffee across her mahogany desk. Morgan is in a holding cell at a black site. She thinks she's at the precinct, but she's actually in federal custody. She has no lawyer yet. No phone call. We have maybe 24 hours before someone notices she's missing. 24 hours to catch a ghost, I said, taking a sip. It burned, but the caffeine didn't touch the exhaustion deep in my bones. We need to flush Blake out, Harper said. He won't come out for money. He won't come out for loyalty. He'll only come out if he thinks he's won. I looked at her. Or if he thinks he's lost everything. Grant is the weak link. I continued pacing the room. He's a businessman playing soldier. Blake is the real soldier. If we take down Grant, Blake loses his funding, his logistics, his cover. Grant is inside Titan HQ. Harper pointed out, that place is a fortress. We can't just storm it. We don't need to storm it, I said, a cold plan forming in my mind. We need to bankrupt it. I pulled out my phone and dialed my CFO. Wake up, Colin, I said when he answered. Initiate protocol RID. Sir, Colin sounded terrified. That protocol liquidates everything. We're talking about a fire sale of Sterling Tech assets. The stock will plummet. The board will have a heart attack. Do it, I ordered. Sell off the subsidiaries. Dump the stock. Trigger the poison pill clauses in our contracts with Titan Security. But sir, I said. Do it, Colin. Now, I hung up. Harper stared at me, her eyes wide. You just torched $1 billion of your own net worth. Money is ammo, I said simply. I'm reloading. Within an hour, the markets reacted. Sterling Tech stock went into freefall. News outlets started reporting rumors of a DOJ investigation, fueled by anonymous tips. I had Harper leak. The narrative was simple. Victor Sterling is under investigation for fraud. His empire is collapsing, and his assets are frozen. To the world, it looked like I was finished. To Grant, it looked like the check he was expecting from Morgan would bounce. At 10 a.m., my phone rang. It was Grant. Victor, he said, his voice tight. What the hell is happening? The news is saying you're insolvent. It's over, Grant, I said, injecting panic into my voice. The feds froze everything. They know about the offshore accounts. They're coming for me. They know. Grant sounded breathless. They know about Vinny, I lied. They know about the docks. I'm running, Grant. I'm leaving the country. You can't run, Grant shouted. If they catch you, they'll trace the money back to Titan. You need to fix this. I can't, I yelled back. I'm done. I'm going to the safe house in the Burkers. I'm taking Leia and disappearing. I hung up. I looked at Harper. He took the bait. He thinks you're vulnerable, Harper said. He thinks you're fleeing with the only witness. He'll call Blake. I said he'll tell him to intercept me at the safe house to finish the job before I can disappear. Harper nodded. And the safe house is a kill box. I said I left Harper's office and drove north. The safe house in the Bergker was a secluded cabin deep in the woods, surrounded by miles of dense forest. It was designed for privacy, but I had retrofitted it years ago for defense. I arrived at noon. Miller's team was there guarding Leia in the makeshift ICU in the basement. Pack up, I told Miller. Move her now. Move her where? Miller asked, alarmed. She's stable, but transport is risky. Move her to the backup site, I said. This place is about to become a war zone. Miller didn't argue. He trusted me. Within 30 minutes, the helicopter lifted off again, carrying my daughter to safety. I was alone. I spent the next 3 hours preparing. I checked the perimeter sensors. I loaded magazines for the AR-15. I kept in the gun safe. I set tripwires in the woods. I positioned cameras. Then I waited. The sun began to set, casting long, eerie shadows through the trees. The forest was silent. No birds. No wind. At 6:42 p.m., a twig snapped. It was faint, almost inaudible, but to my ears, it was a gunshot. I watched the monitors in the basement command center. 3 thermal signatures moving through the woods. Professional, spread out, covering each other's blind spots. They were good, but they were on my turf. I spoke into the intercom system, my voice booming through the hidden speakers in the trees. Welcome home, Blake. The figure stopped. One of them signaled, a clenched fist. Hold. I know you can hear me, I continued. Grant told me you were coming. He's very chatty when he thinks his money is gone. One of the figures moved forward, stepping into a clearing. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing tactical gear without insignia. He looked up at the camera hidden in a birdhouse. He pulled down his mask. It was him, Blake Turner, older, scarred, with a patch over one eye, the eye he lost in the crash that supposedly killed him. You always did talk too much, Victor, Blake shouted, his voice rough. Come out, let's finish this like men. Men don't beat girls with bricks, I replied over the speaker. Blake laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. That was business. This is pleasure. He signaled his team. They moved toward the house. I flipped the switch on the console. Outside, a series of floodlights blazed to life, blinding them. At the same time, high-frequency sonic emitters screeched, a sound that disoriented the equilibrium. Blake's men stumbled, covering their ears. Blake dropped to a knee, raising his rifle. I didn't shoot. Not yet. I pressed another button. The sprinklers on the lawn turned on, but it wasn't water. It was gasoline. Last chance, Blake, I yelled. Drop the weapons. Blake looked at the gasoline soaking his boots. He looked at the house. He sneered. You won't do it, he yelled back. You're soft, Victor. You became a suit. You don't have the guts to burn it down. I looked at the monitor. I looked at the man who had betrayed his country, his unit, and his friend. The man who had ordered the destruction of my daughter's face. I didn't feel soft. I felt like iron. You're right, I whispered to myself. I won't burn it down. I picked up the AR-15 and walked up the basement stairs. I'm going to tear it down. I kicked open the front door. Blake saw me instantly. He raised his rifle. I was faster. I fired 3 shots. 2 took out the lights above him, plunging the yard back into semi-darkness. The third hit the tree next to his head, showering him with bark. Move! Blake screamed to his team. The firefight began. Bullets shredded the wood of the porch. Glass shattered. I moved, firing, taking cover, moving again. It was a dance I knew well, but this wasn't just a gunfight. This was a trap. I led them toward the east side of the property, toward the old barn. They followed, thinking they had me pinned. They didn't know the barn was rigged. I ran inside, climbing the ladder to the loft. Blake and his 2 men burst through the doors a moment later. End of the line, Victor, Blake yelled, scanning the shadows. I looked down from the rafters. I had the detonator in my hand. You forgot the first rule of the unit, Blake, I called out. He looked up, finding me. What's that? He sneered, aiming his weapon. Always check your 6, I said. I pressed the button. But it wasn't explosives. It was the heavy automated bay doors slamming shut behind them, locking with a magnetic seal. At the same time, tear gas canisters dropped from the ceiling, filling the barn with thick white smoke. They were trapped, blind, choking. I put on my gas mask and dropped down from the loft. I wasn't here to kill them with a bomb. I was here to take them apart, piece by piece. I moved into the smoke. The ghost was hunting. The barn was a swirling void of white smoke and coughing. Blake's men were firing blindly, their bullets punching harmless holes in the wooden walls. I moved low, a shadow within a shadow, guided by the thermal optics on my mask. I took the first man down with a sweeping leg kick that shattered his knee. He screamed, dropping his rifle. I silenced him with a swift blow to the temple. 1 down. The second man panicked, backing into a corner, his weapon shaking. I disarmed him with a wrist lock and a chokehold that put him to sleep in 6 seconds. 2 down. That left Blake. He wasn't panicking. He was standing in the center of the barn, his rifle shouldered, pivoting with disciplined precision. He knew I was there. He knew the game. You think gas scares me? Blake's voice was muffled by his own mask, but the sneer was audible. I breathed worse than this in Fallujah while you were signing checks. I holstered my pistol. I wanted him to feel this. I lunged out of the smoke, tackling him. We hit the dirt floor hard. His rifle skittered away. He pulled a combat knife, a serrated blade that gleamed in the dim light. He slashed, catching my forearm. The pain was sharp, hot, but I ignored it. I blocked his next strike, twisting his arm, driving my knee into his ribs. He grunted, but didn't fold. He headbutted me, the hard plastic of his mask cracking against mine. I stumbled back. We circled each other in the haze, 2 relics of a forgotten war. Why, Blake? I asked, my voice grating. For money. You sold your soul for a paycheck. I sold my soul when I followed you into that village. Blake roared, lunging again. You got a medal? I got a discharge and a broken body. The world owes me, Victor. You owe me. Laya didn't owe you anything, I shouted, catching his wrist and driving him back against a support beam. She was in the way, Blake spat. She found the manifest. She knew about the shipments. She had to go. I ripped the mask off his face. I ripped mine off too. I wanted him to look me in the eye. You're done, I said, pinning him to the wood. Am I? Blake wheezed, blood on his teeth. Kill me then. Be the killer you always were. Prove me right. I held the knife to his throat. My hand trembled. Every instinct screamed to push the blade forward, to end the threat, to avenge my daughter. But then I heard a sound. A phone ringing. Not mine. Blake's. It was in his tactical vest. I grabbed it. The screen lit up with a video call request. The caller ID said, Architect. I looked at Blake. He was smiling. Answer it, Victor. Meet the boss. I kept the knife at his throat and accepted the call. I turned the screen so I could see it. The image that flickered onto the screen wasn't Grant. It wasn't Morgan. It was a man sitting in a high-backed leather chair, his face partially obscured by shadow, but as he leaned forward, the light caught his features. Silver hair, a politician's smile, a suit that cost more than my house. Senator Julian Thorne. My breath caught. Senator Thorne was the chairman of the Defense Appropriations Committee. He was the man who signed the checks for Titan security. He was the man running for president on a law and order platform. Blake, the senator said, his voice smooth and cultured, "Is the problem resolved?" I turned the camera to face me. Thorne's smile vanished. He didn't look scared. He looked annoyed. "Mr. Sterling," Thorne said coolly, "you are proving to be remarkably resilient." "Senator," I said, my voice ice. "You're the architect." "I am a man who ensures stability," Thorne replied. "Your daughter stumbled upon a supply chain that ensures American interests abroad. Her curiosity was inconvenient." "Inconvenient?" I laughed. A harsh, broken sound. "You crushed her face because she found a packing slip. She found evidence of illegal arms sales to sanctioned militias." Thorne corrected evidence that would destabilize an entire region. "And my campaign." "You're going to prison," I said. Thorne chuckled. "I don't think so. Do you know who you're talking to? I have the DOJ in my pocket. I have the press on speed dial. You are a disgraced billionaire with a history of violence who just assaulted a decorated veteran. Who do you think they will believe? They'll believe the evidence?" I said. "What evidence?" Thorne scoffed. "Blake's word, he's a mercenary. Morgan's testimony, she's a scorned ex-wife. You have nothing, Victor, just a knife and a dying man." He was right. I had pieces, but not the king. Thorne was insulated by layers of power I couldn't touch. "Goodbye, Mr. Sterling," Thorne said, reaching for the button to end the call. Wait, the voice didn't come from me. It came from the shadows of the barn. Thorne froze. Blake's eyes widened. A figure stepped out of the smoke. It was a woman. She was wearing tactical gear, holding a suppressed pistol. She moved with a grace that was terrifyingly familiar. She walked into the light. It was Paige, my new wife, Leia's stepmother, the woman who had been at home, supposedly waiting for news. The woman I had protected, kept in the dark, treated like a civilian. She looked at the phone screen. "Hello, Julian," she said. Thorne's face went white. Agent Ross Page smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a wolf. "Special Agent Paige Ross, FBI, Organized Crime Division," she corrected. "And you're not just on a video call, Senator. You're being broadcast live to the federal grand jury in D.C. She held up her own phone. It was recording. "We've been watching you for 2 years, Julian." Paige said, her voice steady. "We knew about the arms. We knew about Titan. We just needed you to confirm the kill order on a U.S. citizen, which you just did." Thorne slammed his laptop shut, the screen going black. I looked at Paige, my wife, the FBI agent. "You knew?" I whispered this whole time. She looked at me, her eyes softening for a fraction of a second. "I couldn't tell you, Victor. It was classified. The operation was too big." "Yila," I choked out. "Did you use her as bait?" "No," Paige's voice cracked. "Yila found out on her own. She brought the evidence to me. She was helping me build the case. I tried to protect her. Victor, I swear, the attack. That wasn't part of the plan. We didn't know they would move so fast." I looked down at Blake. He was laughing again. A wet gurgling sound. "Everybody's got secrets, Vic," he wheezed. "Even the wife." I pistol-whipped him into unconsciousness. I couldn't listen to him anymore. I stood up, facing Paige. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a numbness that spread from my chest to my fingertips. "You let me think I was alone," I said. "You were never alone," she said, stepping closer. "Miller, I sent him. Harper, I briefed her. The leak about your bankruptcy? My idea. We needed you to be the lightning rod, Victor. We needed you to draw them out so we could catch the senator. You used me," I said. "I saved you," she replied fiercely. "And now we're going to save Leia. And we're going to bury every single one of them." She handed me a headset. "The raid is starting," she said. "Federal teams are hitting Titan HQ, the senator's estate, and the docks right now." I put on the headset. I heard the chatter of tactical teams. "Alpha Team breach. Bravo Team, secure the perimeter. Target acquired. Senator Thorne is in custody." It was over. The trap had sprung. But as I looked at Paige, I realized the war wasn't over. The battle for my family, for trust, for the truth, that was just beginning. Take him, I said, pointing at Blake's unconscious body. He's yours. I walked out of the barn into the cool night air. The smoke was clearing, the stars were out. I had won. I had crushed the dealers, the betrayal, the conspiracy, but as I stood there looking up at the moon, I wondered if there was anything left of my life to salvage. The silence after the raid was deafening. The barn, once a chaotic theater of smoke and violence, was now a crime scene, crawling with federal agents. Paige was directing them, her voice crisp and professional, listing evidence tags and transport protocols. I stood by the open bay doors, watching her. She was brilliant, lethal, and a complete stranger. Victor. She stood beside me. She'd holstered her weapon, but the wall between us was still up. They're taking Blake to a secure medical facility. He'll survive to stand trial. Senator Thorne is already being processed at Quantico. Morgan and Grant are in separate interrogation rooms, turning on each other faster than we can type. And Leia? I asked, not looking at her. She's safe, Paige said softly. The backup site is a federal safe house. She's getting the best care in the world. I finally turned to look at her. Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have killed them, she said simply. You would have gone hunting, Victor, and you would have ended up in a cell right next to them. I needed you to be the distraction, not the executioner. I am the executioner, I said. That's what I do. Not anymore, she said, reaching for my hand, but stopping inches away. You're a father and a husband. If you can forgive me. I looked at her hand. The ring I gave her was gone, replaced by a tactical glove. Let's finish this first, I said, walking past her toward the waiting SUV. Then we'll see what's left to forgive. The next few weeks were a blur of depositions, grand juries, and sterile waiting rooms. I watched from behind one-way glass. As the empire of lies crumbled, Morgan was the first to break. Faced with the recording from the chapel and the financial trail Paige's team uncovered, she cut a deal. She gave up Grant. She gave up the offshore accounts. She detailed every meeting, every payment, every cold-blooded decision to sacrifice our daughter for a payout. She cried when she signed the confession, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of self-pity. Grant tried to play the soldier. He sat in the interrogation room stone-faced, reciting his name and rank. But when they played the tape of Senator Thorne throwing him under the bus, calling him a useful idiot, Grant cracked. He slammed his fist on the table and started talking. He revealed the locations of the arms caches, the names of the foreign buyers, the corrupt officials on Titan's payroll. But the real show was Senator Thorne. I sat in the gallery during his arraignment. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, cameras, the curious public. Thorne stood tall, wearing an expensive suit, his silver hair perfectly coiffed. He pleaded not guilty with a sneer. Then the prosecutor, a sharp woman named Eleanor, whom Harper had brought in, played the video from the barn. The courtroom went silent as Thorne's voice filled the air. She found evidence of illegal arms sales. Her curiosity was inconvenient. Thorne's face turned the color of ash. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder, whispering frantically, but Thorne shook him off. He stared at me across the aisle. I held his gaze. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just looked at him with the dead, flat eyes of a man who had already buried him. But the final nail wasn't the video, it was Leia. 3 months after the attack, Leia woke up. I was there. Paige was there. She opened her eyes, groggy and confused. When she saw me, she tried to smile, but the scars on her face made it painful. Dad, she whispered. I held her hand, weeping openly. I'm here, baby. I'm here. She squeezed my fingers, weak. But there, did we get them? I looked at Paige. Yeah, we got them all. Leia insisted on testifying. Her doctors advised against it. I advised against it, but she was my daughter. She had steel in her spine. 6 months later, she was wheeled into the courtroom. Her face was still healing, marked by surgical lines and fading bruises. She wore them like war paint. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear. She told the jury about the discrepancy in the shipping manifests. She told them about following the trucks to the docks. She told them about the moment she realized her own mother was involved. I saw her car, Leia said, looking directly at Morgan, who was sitting at the defense table, refusing to make eye contact. I saw my mother handing an envelope to the man who hurt me. The jury gasped. Morgan put her head in her hands. Lala finished her testimony and looked at me. I nodded, proud. The verdict came back in 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Morgan, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud. Grant, arms trafficking, treason. Blake, attempted murder, domestic terrorism. Senator Thorne, treason, conspiracy, corruption. The judge, Judge Nathaniel, looking stern and biblical, handed down the sentences. For the betrayal of public trust and the callous destruction of a young woman's life, he said, looking at Thorne, I sentence you to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Thorne slumped in his chair. Morgan Sterling, the judge continued, for the betrayal of the most sacred bond, that of a mother to her child. You are sentenced to 50 years, Morgan screamed. She was dragged out of the courtroom, kicking and pleading. Grant and Blake got life. I walked out of the courthouse. The steps were crowded with reporters. Microphones were shoved in my face. Mr. Sterling, how do you feel? Is it true you're stepping down as CEO? What will you do now? I stopped. I looked at the sea of cameras. I said into the microphones like the trash has been taken out. I pushed through the crowd and got into the waiting car. Paige was in the driver's seat. Where to? She asked. Oh, I said, the real one. We drove in silence for a while. The city skyline receded in the rear-view mirror. So, Paige said eventually, are we going to talk about it, about you lying to me for 2 years? I asked about me saving your life and your soul? She corrected. I looked at her. She was tired. The lines around her eyes were deeper. She had aged 10 years and 10 months. You're a good agent, Paige, I said. I'm a better wife, she said softly. If you let me be. I reached over and took her hand. It was warm, real. I don't know if I can trust you yet, I admitted. That's fair, she said, squeezing my hand. I have a lifetime to earn it back. We arrived at the new house, a sprawling ranch in Montana, far away from the skyscrapers and the docks. Leia was already there, sitting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sunset over the mountains. I got out of the car and walked up to her. I sat beside her. They're gone, Dad, she asked, not looking away from the horizon. Buried, I said. Deep, she nodded. She touched her cheek, tracing the line of a scar. I don't look like me anymore, she whispered. I turned her face toward mine. I saw the patchwork of healing skin, the slight asymmetry of her smile. But I also saw her eyes, bright, fierce, alive. You look like a survivor, I said. You look like a warrior. You look beautiful, she smiled. And this time it reached her eyes. So do we, she said, looking past me at Paige, who was standing by the car waiting. I waved Paige over. She hesitated, then walked up the steps and sat on the other side of Leia. We sat there, the three of us, as the sun dipped below the peaks, painting the sky in fire and gold. The dealers were gone. The billionaire father was gone. The secret agent was gone. All that was left was a family, broken, scarred, stitched back together with difficult truths. But as the first star appeared in the twilight, I realized something. We were unbreakable. The prison transfer bus was an ugly windowless thing painted a sterile white that was already peeling. I sat in my car parked on a ridge overlooking the access road to the ADX Florence Supermax facility. This was the end of the line, the Alcatraz of the Rockies beside me. Harper adjusted her sunglasses. You don't have to watch this, Victor. It's done. I need to see the door close, I said. Through my binoculars, I watched the bus rumble to a halt at the heavy steel gates. Armed guards with dogs patrolled the perimeter. This wasn't a country club prison. This was a concrete tomb for the worst of humanity. Terrorists, spies, and now my family. The doors opened. The prisoners were marched out in single file, shackled hand and foot, wearing bright orange jumpsuits. I saw Grant first. He looked smaller, his military posture gone. He stumbled, and a guard shoved him forward. He looked up at the sky one last time, the last time he would see unfiltered sunlight for the rest of his natural life. Then came Blake. He was limping, favoring the leg I'd shattered. He didn't look up. He stared at the ground, defeated. The fire was gone. He was just a number now. Then, Senator Thorne, he tried to maintain some dignity, walking with his chin up, but the shackles clanking around his ankles ruined the effect. He looked like exactly what he was, an old man who had gambled everything on power and lost to the truth. And finally Morgan. She looked hollow. Her hair, once perfectly styled, was chopped short. Her face was gaunt. She paused at the gate, looking back toward the road, toward the world she was leaving behind. For a second, I thought she looked right at my car, right at the ridge. It was impossible. I was a mile away, but a chill went down my spine anyway. "They'll be in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day," Harper said, reading from a file. "No contact with the outside world, no interviews, no book deals. They are effectively erased." "Good," I said. The heavy steel doors of the intake facility slid open. The line of orange jumpsuits shuffled inside. Morgan was the last one. As she stepped across the threshold, the massive door began to close. It shut with a finality that echoed even from this distance. Clang. They were gone, buried alive in concrete and steel. I lowered the binoculars. The knot in my chest, the one that had been tightening since the moment I saw that video of Laya, finally loosened. "It's over," I said. "Legally?" "Yes," Harper said, starting the car. "Financially, you have work to do. Sterling Tech is stabilizing, but the sell-off cost you a fortune." "I have enough," I said. "I have what matters." We drove back to the private airfield where the jet was waiting, not the corporate Godfried. I had sold that, a smaller sensible charter. Paige was waiting on the tarmac. She was holding a file folder. "One last loose end," she said as I approached. I tensed. "What is it?" She handed me the folder. "Vinny, the broker at the docks." I opened it. It was a report from the coroner's office. "Deceased. Cause of death. Blunt force trauma unsolved. Found him in a dumpster 3 days ago." Paige said, "Looks like the cartel boss you called wasn't happy about the freelancers." I closed the folder. "Karma, justice," Paige corrected. "Just a different kind." We boarded the plane. Laya was already inside, asleep in one of the reclining seats. She looked peaceful. The anger, the fear, it was slowly fading from her face, replaced by a quiet strength. I sat across from her, watching her breathe. "You know," Paige said, sitting next to me, "you still have the coin." I reached into my pocket. Blake's challenge coin, the symbol of everything that had gone wrong. "What are you going to do with it?" she asked. I looked out the window as the plane taxied down the runway. We lifted off, climbing above the clouds, leaving the prison, the city, and the past far below. "I know a place," I said. We flew north toward the mountains, toward Montana. When we landed, we drove to a spot Leia loved, a high overlook near a glacial lake. The water was deep, cold, and clear. I stood at the edge of the cliff. The wind whipped my coat around me. I held the coin up to the sun. It glinted. A piece of silver that had cost so much blood. "For the ghosts," I whispered. I threw it. It arched high into the air, spinning, catching the light one last time before plummeting down. It hit the water with a tiny splash and vanished instantly into the depths. Gone. I turned around. Yila and Paige were waiting for me by the truck. "Ready?" Yila asked. "Yeah," I said, walking toward them. "I'm ready for what?" Paige asked, smiling. "For whatever comes next," I said. I climbed into the driver's seat. We weren't running anymore, we weren't hunting, we were just living, and that was the greatest victory of all. 6 months later, the snow on the peaks of the Montana mountains was finally starting to melt. The air smelled like pine needles and wet earth, the smell of things waking up after a long, hard winter. I stood on the porch of the ranch holding a mug of coffee. My hand was steady. For the first time in 20 years, I wasn't scanning the perimeter for threats. I wasn't looking for exits. I was just looking at the sunrise. The screen door creaked open behind me. Lila stepped outside. She wasn't hiding herself anymore. For the first few months after everything happened, she wore scarves, hoodies, anything that could cover the left side of her face where the reconstruction surgery had left its mark behind. But today, her hair was pulled back completely. The scars were still there, thin, pale lines running from her cheekbone down to her jaw. But they no longer looked like wounds. They looked like a map showing exactly where she had been and everything she had survived. "You're up early," she said, leaning against the railing beside me. "Old habits," I smiled back. "How did yesterday's meeting go?" Lila's eyes lit up instantly. "It was incredible, Dad. The governor signed off on the grant. The Sterling Initiative is officially live now." A lump formed in my throat. She hadn't touched the settlement money, the millions seized from Morgan and Grant's assets, to buy cars or fund vacations for herself. Instead, she had launched a foundation, a legal and financial shield for victims of domestic conspiracy and violence. She was using the very money her own mother had once tried to steal to save people just like herself. "You're doing incredible work, kid," I told her. "Better work than I ever managed to do. I learned from the best," she said, bumping her shoulder against mine. "You fought monsters with guns. I'm fighting them with laws instead. It's the same war, just different weapons." Paige stepped outside a moment later, carrying a basket of laundry. She paused when she noticed us standing there, the morning light catching the simple gold band on her finger, a real one this time, not some prop for a cover story. "Breakfast in 10, she said, though she didn't move right away. She just watched the two of us. "You two look serious." "Just thinking," I said. "About them?" Paige asked quietly. I looked eastward, toward where the sun was breaking over the ridge. I knew that thousands of miles away, inside a concrete box in Colorado, Morgan was waking up to a steel toilet and a gray wall. Grant was waking up to another day of complete silence. Blake was waking up to a body that would never function properly again. "No," I said honestly. "I wasn't thinking about them at all. That's the real punishment, isn't it? They're the ones who have to think about us every single day. They have to rot in the darkness wondering what we're doing out here. But us, we don't think about them at all anymore." Lila nodded in agreement. "They're ghosts now, Dad, and we don't believe in ghosts anymore." I wrapped my arm around my daughter and reached out to take Paige's hand in mine. I used to believe that being a protector meant becoming the scariest thing hiding in the dark. I thought it meant crushing skulls and burying enemies without a second thought. But standing there, looking at the two women beside me, strong, brilliant, and alive, I realized how wrong I had been. The real victory was never found in the violence. It wasn't found in the trap I had sprung, or the courtroom verdict that followed. The real victory was this quiet morning, this simple cup of coffee, this peace. "You know," Lila said, gazing out at the horizon, "they tried to crush us. They tried to bury us." "Yeah," I said, watching sunlight flood the valley with warm golden light. "They forgot that we were seeds." We stood there together until the sun rose fully, warming our faces completely. The nightmares were gone now. The hunt was finally over. For the first time in my entire life, the soldier inside me was at rest, and the father had finally truly come home.